Hey, how's it going? It's great with the Garden of Eater.
And Shelby.
And of course, we have our usual Chance and Brian to complete our Team Florida aquascaping team. How's it going, guys?
What's up?
Who's that?
I just got fish boned.
Oh,
Wow, puppy.
Oh.
it's not a little puppy though.
Boy, that's not your.
It's just a little guy.
Just a dog.
Just found it.
So how you doing, Brian?
I'm good. I'm exhausted. Made aquachart yesterday, and that's just a long day in the Florida sun around a fire.
I saw you went to the springs though.
I did.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think our guests will talk. We'll have a good topic on. I'll loop that in on the with our guest because he's a fan of that type of thing too.
Sweet.
And speaking of our guest, I'll go ahead and bring him on. Welcome, Johnathon. How's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. How about you guys?
Doing all right tonight. Moving along. We got some rest the last couple of days. It's been a lot easier than the shows for sure, but
Yeah, those shows, they take a lot out of you. I mean, they're fun and all. It's a lot of fun, but also a lot of work as well too. So it's. I always tell people, I'm always like, I see a lot of folks there, a lot of friends and everything like that, but I feel like I don't get enough time to talk with everyone. You know what I mean?
So those of our audience that don't know you, would you like to introduce yourself real quick?
So I'm Johnathon. I'm a hobbyist. I work in the aquarium industry. I've worked in the aquarium industry most of my whole life. I guess you could say I'm an aquascaper as well too. I do a lot of different things from freshwater planted tanks to macroalgae planted tanks to native fish tanks. I've got a lot of different kind of focuses, or know a little about a lot, right? I think that's the phrase. So I work in the industry for a product manufacturer, OASE, and do my hobby on the side. So it works out pretty well.
Well, I don't know where Brian went, but he disappeared when it's his turn to ask his famous questions. So, I don't know. Chance, you want to be Brian?
Sure. So, Johnathon.
Yes.
How did you get into the hobby? Where'd you get your start?
Oh man, I think I have a very common or familiar start, just like a lot of us here in the States. We all kind of started with that, 20-gallon Aqueon tank, right? And had the typical fluorescent clown puke gravel and all that jazz. So I same start as everyone else, right? You get interested, or you see that one fish, or you go to the aquarium store when you're a kid, and you're like, oh wow, that'd be really neat, cool, you can keep shrimp in tanks, or cool, you could keep let's see, what was I into in high school? I was really into all the oddball stuff when I was in high school. So some of the oddball like nanofish, but also more or less it's really into archer fish too. Anything that had really cool physiology traits, or really cool I don't know, just behaviors too, were always of interest. So
You ever keep any biters?
I didn't, but that was always. I kept African rope fish, right? Different, but kind of similar in a sense, and those were really cool. I was really big into spiny eels, and those
Nice,
are yeah. There's so many different species too. Once you actually dive into it, there's a lot of really. They come from all over the place too, so it's really kind of diverse. It's neat because you can find some neat species that are suitable for medium-sized tanks as well too, not the big tank buster like fire eels and tire track eels and such, right?
Yeah.
Although if I was to ever have a big monster fish tank, it would probably be with some of those guys in it, to be honest.
Fire eels are so cool. They're
the ones
really...
at the Triple Crown were calling for me.
Yeah,
I was like, I don't have any tank big enough for them.
I kept giving them the side eye when I was walking past that booth, because I was just like, they were really nice and healthy. They didn't have any blemishes or scales missing, or they have really small scales, or not really scales at all, mostly just a fine skin almost. But yeah, they were really neat. You know, every time I see them in shops, I gotta just kind of close my eyes and walk past them, blind myself and walk away because I don't know, they're neat. The Tanganyika ones too are neat.
Most of the time we see them at shops, they're like in a tank full of plants or like a bunch of like hiding spots for them. They're like all out in the open, and there was a bunch of them. So it was kind of cool to see them, so many of them at the Triple Crown.
They're just neat. They're neat fish. They have good personalities too, so they definitely are like kind of like a wet pet when they get large enough. You know what I mean? Hand feeding them and things like that. Which, you know, if you're into that kind of thing, you know, they're a good version of that as opposed to a lot of the other larger monster fish, so to speak. So yeah, but aside from fire eels in high school, I got really into just like all the different niches. Got into saltwater too when I was in high school. In fact, my first job was locally here in Chicagoland area at one of the larger independent pet stores. So I actually drove. Probably not the most cost-effective first job, but I actually drove 40 minutes from the suburbs of out in the burbs of not really Chicago, but Chicagoland area. And I would drive 40 minutes all the way to Schaumburg, Illinois, and, you know, go work at this place. I'm pretty sure because I was driving the family Jeep Wrangler that every time I drove to work, I burned off just as much gas as I was making money to fill up the tank. So doing that and the money that came out of the paychecks to pay for whatever I was bringing home every night when I was, you know, new shipments and all that jazz, it offered some good experience though. And, you know, it definitely put the foot in the door for, you know, really kind of building the love and getting to work with a bunch of different species. Just, you know, when you're a very enthusiastic kind of young hobbyist and you get to work at a store that does have some really neat species, different species of pistos and things like that. It was great to be able to go through there. You know, you're looking at all the names, you're really digging on research at night and stuff. And you partner that with how we used to look up a lot of information on all the old fish forums and everything like that. And it was just a combination that kind of, you know, I guess was intoxicating. And so got deeper and deeper down the saltwater reef tank kind of rabbit hole and into planted tanks more and all that jazz. And went to school and college for aquatic biology and worked in the aquaculture lab at University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point on the 4th floor of the Natural Resources building. We had a whole wet specimen lab. So we had like a big 450-gallon like trough tank. It's one of those like plastic tubs that has the one viewing acrylic panel on the front.
Yeah.
And we had like all 7 species of gar. So that included the tropical species. We had 2 of them. And I think at the time, like the university was like one of like a small group of like 5 or 10 people in the US that had that species of gar, just because they're very hard to come by, I guess. I don't know if that's changed since then. You know, again, I got into kind of like weird oddballs, but then I kind of got out of it and got more into like the typical community rut and all that jazz and tried to get more into nanofish and stuff. But in college, it was really cool because I also had the ability to work with native fish as well too. And I think that's really where some of my love for native fish kind of blossomed and the appreciation for them as well too. Wisconsin, even though we're far, you know, it's far up north, and I say like I'm far away from Wisconsin, but I live 13 miles from the border. So, you know, it's pretty easy to jump over the border and grab, you know, some Nugalaris, which they only sell in Wisconsin and all that jazz. So, I got into native fish. You know, did the whole ichthyology club, did the ichthyology course where you have to memorize all 500 or 400 and oh boy, I'm going to get grilled for this later, but 400 something native species of Wisconsin fishes, and you have to know the distinguishing traits and lab practicals on that and all that jazz. We would, we had an ichthyology club that we had permits to be able to go down in Tennessee and use seine nets to not collect, but just to sample, to take photos and then release. And then we also had the right permits to go around Wisconsin and check out some creeks in that area, which is really cool. So many different types of like lampreys and really cool darters and all sorts of fun stuff. So yeah, and after college, I didn't really have anything lined up in the sciences, and you know, sciences sometimes can tend to be a lot of temporary jobs where you start one job and you're looking for your next one while you're working the one that you just got. So I kind of stayed in the aquarium industry just because it provided some stability and you know, me and my girlfriend, she moved back, and her first job actually was only a couple towns away from my hometown. So, you know, we're still together, and now we have a place together a couple towns over, and I travel a lot for work. So it's a good central point in the middle of the Midwest that I can kind of shoot out to all the different areas. I'll be going to like Western Michigan next week, and Missouri in the next couple weeks, and all that fun stuff. So that's kind of how I got into it, and through that, I just, you know, all aspects of aquarium are quite interesting. And you know, there's so many different niches. You know, I mean, Chance, you're really into some of the really cool plants out there and native plants in Florida. You know, Grant, you're really into shrimp, and Shelby, I know you're getting into killies, as we talked about at this last show and whatnot. And I'm sure we'll have to trade some killie eggs when mine start breeding and whatnot too. But and then Brian, of course, you got everything.
I'm on the little guys, the microorganisms.
Oh no, you got a lot going on. It's great. It's great. I love how everyone has their niches, but I love also how everyone is so willing to explore different areas that, you know, we may not all be as familiar with as other people. It's a good thing, and it just helps build community when you can call someone up and, you know, hey, Chance, you know, hey, I'm having trouble with my Rotala, Florida. What's going on? Does it like hard water? Does it like soft water? What's going on? You know, I need a hand. Something like that, right? So it's
Yeah.
It makes it fun, you know.
So on this show, the only correct answer is I had a goldfish tank and I discovered a Kashiamano book. So that's the only real answer, you know, we accept here.
Fair.
I'm just kidding. No, I'm just
Well,
joking.
no, well, I did have the goldfish tank. I mean, when I was really young, like 7 years old, I had a goldfish tank. And then I think it was really ghost shrimp that kind of like hit that nerve where I just kind of like, years later in high school, we still had the same 20-gallon tall locked away in the attic. And then my dad has always had this like really old, like 26-gallon hex tank, you know, with the wood grain, kind of like this one that you see here with the wood grain trim, but it was the hex tank, the vertical tanks. And I used to tease him all the time because the silicone work on that thing was like deteriorating. It was on like the second story house, or second story of the house and whatnot, over by like the loft office and whatnot. So I was like, one of these days it's just gonna flood over when everyone's sitting on the couch, and it's just gonna, one of those seams is gonna burst, and you're gonna feel it. Which ironically, I accidentally was the one to overflow the tank on the second story floor, and that was a 65-gallon archerfish tank I had, and it was with one of the smaller species. I think it's like Toxotes microlepis is the species, and they're a little bit harder to find because most of the time you just find the brackish water species, but these ones are found more inland, so more freshwater. And yeah, so I was doing a water change, right, with buckets and a hose, and I think a little pebble got stuck in it, and I was trying to be smart, or what I thought was smart at the time, and I would let the tank drain with the hose and time it and go work on something, or, you know, whatever, making some goofy game on Game Maker because I was a nerd in high school and all that jazz. And one time the pebble got stuck when I timed it, and so when I went to do another bucket, the pebble came loose, and of course it was siphoning much faster. And that's when I heard water coming down through the kitchen ceiling fan that was below my bedroom, and the floor.
Oh no!
The kitchen fan was on, so it was just making it even worse. So it was like around.
It was like a water tour
all over the kitchen. My parents were in the basement, so I just kind of had to like turn off. You know, went found the breaker, like turned it off, like turned off the fan. My dad came up. He's like, "Why is the ceiling fan off? And more importantly, why is the ceiling completely saturated with water?" So, you know, we all have our little oops moments, right?
Yeah, luckily we don't have a second story floor. But before we get into more about Johnathon, let's dive into chat. Try to keep up a little bit with that.
Good
Absolutely.
luck. We're famous for not keeping up, though. Well, hopefully Jamie will watch the replay. Have a safe travel. It's nice seeing you pop in here. Hello, Scuba Steve.
No, you got to bring up these.
What?
You got to bring
okay.
up that.
Scuba Steve said, "Oh, he's my guy right here, the macro
There you go.
algae guy."
Man. Like there's a lot of macroalgae folks out there. You know, it's cool because the more people that do macroalgae tanks, the more different. I think of it like we're all artists, right? And each artist kind of has like a different flavor, you know, like chef kiss, you know, or like a different type of style, right? So like no matter how many people get into it and how many people do macroalgae tank, it's always really unique and individualistic to that person and the style and how they choose to go about it. So honestly, the more people, the better that are doing macroalgae. I don't claim to know everything, and I'm far from knowing everything. I'm still kind of really getting into my own macroalgae journey, but I appreciate it, Steve.
I only know one other tank that I've ever liked that's more than yours, and it's only because it had a bunch of the sea slugs, like a huge variety of them. So
That's
until you have like a massive army of variety of sea slugs, you can't have that tank
Can't beat that
position for me. Yeah.
Okay.
It got the nudibranch king status, right? That's
there you go.
So cute.
nudibranchs are cool.
Yeah, the macroalgae thing's interesting because it really, in the hobby, really the variety hasn't been that widely available until probably like, 5 or so years ago. Because everybody, I know like there's a lot of people that have both fresh and salt water, and a lot of the planted guys, they always wanted to be able to do it, but unless you're really deep in that side of the hobby, it was hard for a long time to even find and source, the variety and keep them all together. So yeah, it's really cool to see them be displays at shows and stuff like that from that standpoint.
Yeah. I've been having a lot of luck finding them recently, actually, out where I've been starting to explore. I got a bunch of pins for a bunch of different varieties. Tom Barr used to be huge into macroalgae on this side, on this coast and down in the Keys. So I've been frequenting a lot of spots and doing my research. So I'm going to probably tear down the 120p and end up doing a 120p macroalgae tank.
Nice. That's a big tank for one too. That'll be fun because you'll be able to do a bunch of different. I mean, some of the
I was going to say I've only really seen nanos. Like yours is probably the biggest I've seen as far as a pure macroalgae tank.
Well, there's some other folks out there like Jeff Miyake I believe he's doing a macroalgae.
Oh, is he doing one?
Yeah, in a 90 centimeter, so 48.
Oh, nice.
There's a lot of them. Like there's a lot out there.
Okay,
there's some good sized ones out there.
Yeah.
Nice.
I saw someone that was doing like a 150 gallon, like 160 gallon, like
yeah.
6 foot tank, and they had
there was a 8-footer that I saw. It
Yeah.
was insane, man. It was like a whole tidal zone. It was so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some really cool tanks out there. It's just one of those things where I think there's still that heavy separation between the freshwater and like marine side of things in the hobby. And, you get that division where people go, oh my God, saltwater is so expensive and so hard to keep. And then you get the other side where it's like, I don't want to keep a couple of sword plants and some guppies, you get both extremes and whatnot. But really there's this really cool blending zone between the two where you can kind of have the best of both worlds. You can have a very densely planted algae tank and have some really amazing fish and invertebrates and stuff, and even corals too. It's just, like you said, Chance. A lot of people do it. It's just a lot of the times the people that are doing them don't really post about them too much. So
yeah, it's not. It's not
a tidal zone. It's a slice of nature. It's really cool.
It seems the people like where the macroalgae hobby's at least from my observation, the people that are doing it well are doing it for their own enjoyment. Like they're either like really accomplished ex-reefers or are people that like just really don't care about being in the limelight anymore and just have taken to their own little niche aspect to keep them more enjoyable in the hobby. But they're like are masters at what they do, though.
Yeah, you can make it very complicated.
Oh yeah, you definitely can. I mean, you can get into keeping macros to the level that you're like keeping some like really high energy planted tanks where you're dosing
or have them go sexual. You turn your water into a pea soup.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. There's a couple different approaches you can really take when it comes to just like any tank, right? You can kind of keep the mentality of, hey, I just want to keep some more easier to keep species, keep an eye on the telltale signs when things aren't going well or when you have nutrient deficiencies, etc., and then dose accordingly. Or, I'm looking into using some, like Two Little Fishes has their like the macroalgae fuge substrate. I think it just I don't know enough about it to talk about it, but I'm seeing how that works or maybe giving that a try, things like that. But you can get into it at all different levels. You could just have a standard 10-gallon tank with a hang on the back filter and a shop light that's 65K spectrum, and you'll be fine. You can grow a good amount of macros with that and just that.
People are doing it in jars, man. There's people that would take specimens and put them in mason jars, or people or other specimen jars, and they keep it alive. This dude's had one for like 14 years now, just a piece of macro.
There was a whole Instagram sort of like macroalgae bowl contest that was going on for a while there. And a lot of interesting creations, and a lot of times people were just using a simple pump or power head just for water circulation.
That's really all they need. Like they're such simple organisms, and then like you're saying, there are ones that are more complicated. So it parallels the planet hobby like so much. Like especially in my realm of like horticulture and the planet hobby. Like you have your weedy specimens, and then you have your more uncommon or rare or hard to grow specimens that require a bit more horticultural care, a bit more know-how, a bit more knowledge, and it's awesome. It's cool because you can then add the saltwater creatures.
Yeah,
you can get into more of the more interesting fauna. Rather than like not to say that things in freshwater aren't interesting, but I mean, come on, like it's like a whole nother world. Some of the saltwater fauna.
It's exactly
70% of our world.
Yeah,
and there's just so much diversity when you look at reef ecosystems. I mean, they're some of the most diverse ecosystems, those and tropical jungles and all that. Just anything along the equator, right? So I think it's cool because when you mix the two, I mean, you really have a pretty big diversity of macroalgae these days. And even then, like Chance, I'm sure you see when you're doing those walks and you're taking a look in the shallows and stuff. Like there's so many species that you don't typically see or are seasonal, or collectors in Florida just don't collect because either
are there laws in collecting algae like there are? Yeah,
I'm pretty sure there are, especially because there's some species that are invasive too. So I don't know the specifics of it. It kind of goes to that same thing of check your local and state guidelines, but I would assume that there's collection restrictions and bag limits and things like that, just the same as I would imagine there are if you're collecting Recordia. You need to have a license for it, or have to be in the specific zone or area that's legally allowed to take from, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, like with plants, you have to acquire a nursery permit to be able to legally collect plants. Like that's what I had to do with the Rotala hermosior and the Gradiola hermosa. Yep. All the Erios, like you have to get that squared away to do it legally.
That's just the same as like up here in Illinois. If you wanted to collect darters and shiners and things like that, like each state is different. So like Indiana's newest 2022 regulations, they still say you can collect bait fish, which pretty much is just identified as cyprinids and stuff, or which would include like most of your shiners and things like that, but doesn't really include your darters because darters are in the perch family, right? Perchidae. So it's still kind of a gray area then. So really the best thing you can do is just get in contact with your state officials or your natural resources department and stuff, and just be honest with them and tell them what you're looking to do and how you want to do it responsibly, and that's why you're contacting them in the first place, right? I don't think most people, if they wanted just to go out and collect some darters, they jump through all the hoops, but I think it's very important to do that because you really don't want to encourage people to just go out and there's all sorts of transmittable diseases with like viral hemorrhaging septicemia is a big one up here in Illinois, and that just transfers by the water, and zebra mussels and other pests and things and all that jazz. So it's a word of caution to anyone listening, please do your research. That's really what it comes down to. Just don't go take, because if you go to like a forest preserve or anything, it's technically considered poaching, and not a good thing if not most places you're probably not going to get caught, but like it's not a good thing to do regardless. So
That's interesting because we all I see that you do a lot of collecting, a lot of netting and wild collecting, and you post a lot of photos on your Instagram and social media and everything like that. You're doing catch and release for all that stuff. It's just what's in the water, right?
So it's just catch and release, and I sterilize all my sampling equipment afterwards with a bleach ratio and a spray bottle out on my driveway, so that way I can try and mitigate any transferring. Now I'm only really going to 2 watersheds in the northern Illinois area. Where I live, we have the Kishwaukee River, which is actually quite diverse and has some really cool species in it. And then the Fox River Watershed, which a lot of people joke about being sludge water and things like that, just because there's so many paper mills that are located on it, and they all discharge into the Fox River. So it's just generally not the highest in regard to water quality, etc. But there are still some cool species in there. But they all eventually run into the Mississippi River drainage, I believe, or connect with further down in Illinois. So I just only do it to take photographs and videos. I think a lot of people don't really realize that there's all these really neat species that are really just like underneath your feet when you're going fishing for bass or any game fish.
Ditches on the side of the road.
Yeah, I mean, you can find sticklebacks on the side of the road, just the same as like if you go to Peru, there's killies on the side of the road, or down by you guys, there's Elisoma, whichever species, Evergladii,
Gilbertii.
Yeah. Right, literally right in your, right in the ditches, which I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit jealous of. You also guys also some, yeah. No, I actually had at the Triple Crown event, there was someone selling specific locations for Elisoma Evergladii, Elisoma Gilbertii. And I got a pair of Gilbertii again. Unfortunately, the female didn't make it, so I just have a male. So I need to get a female from the same locale so I can breed them or throw them in a little 5-gallon display tank. And
if you tell me the locale, I have people who a dude who collects.
Oh, nice.
He's got a guy.
So
is his name Ken?
No, his name's Dave.
Okay, I gotcha.
I think Ken lives up by me.
Yeah, I think he's more.
Does he do killies?
Yeah, he does a lot of like native killies. Which
I've been to his house before.
I had to be careful of though, because some of I don't know the exacts, but there's a specific killie here in Illinois that's considered threatened and endangered, and that's another thing you have to be careful of. Is you don't want to keep, even though you source it from a different state where it may be legal or it may be not threatened or non-endangered there. You do not want to keep. You need to check your local, your state endangered and threatened species list, so you're not keeping anything that. Because the biggest thing is the paper trail. Then you know what I mean, and showing that you were able to get it from somewhere and legally, and purchased where it was sustainably caught or bred or whatever the case is. And that's kind of the downside of natives, and a lot of the nuances that are involved with keeping natives can be a little bit of a hassle to kind of understand if you really are trying to do it like ethically and all that jazz. So I hope that gets a little bit more clear, or hopefully in the future, state agencies and such kind of actually see the aquarium industry as a way for informing people about the species. I think you can kind of grab it by the horns, but again, state funding and all that stuff.
I think that there's a little bit of budging on both ways. I think that we have to focus more on, saltwater side especially needs to focus more on aquaculture and stuff like that. But at the same time, I definitely think there's the educational side of it. And I know Grant and Shelby loves to do the auction things, and there's always, you never know what's going to show up at those things, and you can find a lot of really interesting stuff.
Yeah. I mean, here's my take on it. Like you look at some species of fish that are around today, like just an example, the white cloud mountain minnow. Like they wouldn't be around if it weren't for the aquarium hobby, Yeah. And you can look at countless species of plants right now that wouldn't be around if it weren't for the aquarium hobby. So why? These laws what are they really doing? Like are they protecting the species, or are they putting the species in waterways that are continuously being polluted, continuously being altered, and keeping them from being bred in captivity and potentially being saved? So like you have to look at how bass backwards some of these laws are, and then make an ethical decision. That's kind of where I stand on it.
The hardest part is that there's so much to know about each ecosystem that is potentially being threatened or future threats to that ecosystem that so like let's do an example of like, okay, so like a great example to go along with what you said is pretty much any Goudaid species from Central America, Mexico, and things of that nature, right? There are so many Goudaid species that are on the CARES, and it's really cool that in the hobby we have the CARES species list and that sort of connection between the sciences, conservation, and the hobbyists here at home. There's a number of Goudaid keepers here in Chicago and whatnot, and Goudaids may not be for everyone, but I mean they really are cool fish.
They're cool. They're a cool live bear.
Especially if you want a tank that's pretty much packed full of really cool live bears and have a colony. It's something different than guppies or tank strain live bears, etc. Right?
And something that's like rare even in the wild. Like they're a dope fish.
Well, and that's a great example of where I think the hobbyist and the aquarium trade is helpful in that sense. And it's just there are certain habitats that are still going strong, and the other side of things that you don't want to do is like promote, like say native fish, for example, and then all of a sudden you see more and more people out in creeks where there may also be like other protected species, like certain clam species and things like that, and they're all romping around. So I think that's where just educating people is the biggest thing, and really just kind of showing people the best you can as far as how to do it in a way that's as respectful and
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, like in Florida, you can't even get a collection permit. Like, good luck. Like you have to be a nursery. You have to be a licensed nursery to get a plant collection permit, or you have to be in league with a herbarium. Or good luck. It won't happen. Anybody who has collected, you're a poacher. But that's so stupid. Like growing up, I've seen preserves be turned into Walmarts. Like it's happened. And, you can't say like right now these habitats are well cared for, but I can tell you in 20 years they won't be.
How many of us started out with an interest in the aquatics just by going and romping around the creek? You know what I mean? Like that.
Or growing up in it.
Well, yeah, exactly. So like that, I think that's another thing also to consider is like that. That's why like I'm a big fan of like conservation districts when they do like bring your kid and go sampling with a county biologist or something like that, or
those programs are so important. Like that's what grabs minds and puts them on the right path as far as doing the right thing in the hobby as well as doing the right thing for the ecosystems.
Yeah, I'm doing a river cleanup with my kids this morning, and I asked my son if he wanted to do that because he had soccer practice or tryouts in the morning, and he's like his eyes lit up when I asked him about like if he wanted to do something like that. So yeah, I mean, even going back to like what Grant's doing with the shrimp and the low weight, just the knowledge and having that products available to be able to save some of these species and be able to recreate certain environments and stuff. You might not think you're doing much, but that's definitely goes a long way as far as people understanding general chemistry and how they can accomplish things. Because not everybody's scientists, and sometimes they just want to figure out the puzzle pieces to be able to accomplish what they want to accomplish. So, yeah, that's just another.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and I understand a lot of the different opinions on both sides. But I really think just getting people involved and getting as much education out there, especially in an age where social media is just so readily at everyone's fingertips. You could see that as there's a lot of negatives of social media and usage of social media, right? But I think you can also just look at it also as a positive too, if you do it the right way. And who's to say what the right way is? But so like for my case, I like to do the What's in Your Creek videos, and I have fun with those. I'm going out and I'm just dipping a dip net in the creek, shuffling around a little bit, not causing any permanent habitat damage or anything. It's no different than a disturbance from like a storm or anything like that. Anything that I catch. Yeah, or like a deer crossing the stream or something like that. Yeah, I'm got skinny legs just like a deer too. So It's fun for me because I get to show people all these species that I worked with in college, and I appreciate. And while we don't have quite the diversity that southeastern U.S. has, I still think it's important. I mean, rainbow darters are very prevalent here, but they're beautiful nonetheless. It just goes back to just because they're common, or you don't see them that often, but they're still around. Like, doesn't mean that they're any less of a cool species to take a peek at.
What you guys have that's amazing are the rock formations and the bankments and stuff like that. Like, close-up shots of that's like insane inspiration for any kind of freshwater artist. Like that's what I look at in your videos the most. Like, is your B-reel. It's like I'm like, oh, look at that. Look at that formation.
We'll have to swap USB drives because I literally, whenever I go out, I now almost spend just as much time like taking photos of the riverbank and immersed foliage growth. And I have a buddy of mine that is a botanist down in central Illinois at the Champaign-Urbana area and whatnot, and that's a really cool area because we got a couple different river systems. And every time I go down there for work, I'll usually take a day off or spend the afternoon with him, and we go out. And he's a plant guy, and I'm a fish guy, so we go walk some creeks that he gets permission for us to go on to. Mind you, again, we're not collecting. I don't go collecting, honestly. If I was to keep natives, I usually find and source them through the hobby and support people in the hobby that are collecting them, such as like Jonah's aquarium. He does all the dip nets, the perfect dip nets and everything like that. He also does have the legal permits to collect species. I believe he's located in Ohio and stuff. And as long as you're not ordering species that are threatened or endangered in your state, you're pretty much good to go. That's a good way. Then you have a paper trail to, not that DNR is going to knock on your door or anything like that, but you have a paper trail, and you're also supporting someone that's in the industry.
I was going to say that it's more about the support. If you support the guys, even if you can go and get it, locally and stuff like that. Sometimes it's about supporting other people in the hobby and getting it from a well-sourced place that the option is not.
So I mean, but like that hobbyist had to get a start somewhere, right? You know what I mean? Like,
usually people
they started collecting and selling fish and breeding fish. You know what I mean? So like that's where I think intention comes in more for things. Like if you're collecting just to like flip a fish, like you literally scoop a fish out and then mail it out the next day, that's screwed up. But if you collect like a pair of fish,
a breeding colony or something,
and you breed them out and you slowly spread them amongst your community or in your fish club, and then like next thing you know, like you have a whole fish club of people who are breeding and are keeping, this group of fish that are, natively, threatened or whatever. Like, are you really doing any harm to the species? Or have you just like created mass awareness around a fish that most people didn't even know existed? Like Everglade, you spoke of Ellisoma evergladii, like so many people didn't even know what that fish was in Florida until like recently when it started coming on the scene more.
Well, it's been around me for ages. I've probably dip netted its territory, but my net's never been small enough to catch them. So like,
right, but that's what I'm saying. Like, people like
I gotta grab something real quick to show you because you're gonna get a kick out of this because it's pretty much spot on with what we're talking about.
All right. Well,
I agree. It's more about finding people that are breeding a colony of something, even if they did collect it wild. Because I'm not against people collecting it wild, as long as you're going with the intention of actually
learning, breeding and learning. Like, do your habitat study.
So here's the Aquarium magazine from 1932, right? August of 1932. This is a U.S. magazine, right? Here's this page. What does that look like? That is a black-banded sunfish. That is still not to this day a commonly known about sunfish species that is absolutely fantastic in aquariums, right? Again, though, Chance, going back to what you're saying, I don't know what the habitat is or its natural range is like these days, but it's such a cool fish, but so many few people know about it, right? I think
Right.
right now we're kind of like in a period where everyone is really getting familiar with all the Ellisoma species right now, just because they make great nano fish tank, inhabitants and whatnot. But and they're beautiful too. But there's just a plethora of really cool species. Any of
And
go for it.
that interest drives attention to their habitat, which is so threatened right now. Like the fish is threatened, sure, but man, the springs and those the tributaries and like everything attached to the rivers attached to the springs, they're so threatened right now with invasive species and with basically water mining, like companies like Nestle just pumping billions of gallons out a week. Like it's ridiculous, man. Like the things that are going on right now that like people are just not really paying attention to, but these fish can draw attention to the habitats that they're from. Like every eye that like focuses on it is a good thing, I think. Like, and it's you get like we were talking about earlier, you get enough of them breeding, enough people stop taking them from the wild. Then you have a few people who are actually successful in breeding and spreading them around to clubs and stuff. You don't need to go find them. They're at auction for $8.
Yeah, it's a great point, because I think it's kind of the conundrum of kind of some of the conservation points that side sort of makes is leave it.
Well, you do that way. The conservation doesn't make its key to fund.
In conservation, yeah, it's very limited also by how much money it's getting and whatnot. A lot of conservation projects and everything are really, unfortunately sometimes become let's protect this area until it just dwindles away and then it's gone. You know what I mean? Because there's only so much.
Or build an $800,000 observation deck.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I think that's where the hobby is very, very productive in that sense, or could be very productive for like some of these like native fish species, for example. Like some of the shiners are not hard to breed. I mean, it's just like any other fish. You try the triggers, you try the different methods of spawning and things like that, and people have gotten them. There's captive reports of all the different sailfin shiners from Florida.
We got some from Bill.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Shiners.
Oh, my. Okay. You guys have a couple of people down there that are working with them. And in fact, I think the University of Florida, or one of your guys' universities down there, is also working on breeding them so that way there's stock available or could be purchased or legally obtained that way. So it's pretty cool. And those
I
are
thought it was more for fisheries, for bait shops.
Probably is.
Shiners are huge for bass fishing.
Yeah. And there used to be places like what was the place that was in Florida? I don't know where it was, but there was an aquaculture place that you could actually purchase stock from online. So you could get really cool species of Florida shiners and things like that they would breed for water quality studies and things like that, to check on, hey, is this chemical that we're putting in the water, is it harming any life? And they use shiners, and more commonly these days is like zebradanios and things like that. And there's literally labs that are run 24 hours 7 days a week, and people need to consistently check water parameters, stuff like that, for that reason and whatnot. But they also on the side sold to the general public too, which again, paper trail, and then you have it and then you're good to go. And they were relatively fair on pricing. You could get a group of 5 or 6 shiners for like $30, and you couldn't get those anywhere else. So the accessibility was really cool. Unfortunately, I think they closed their doors like a year or two ago. But yeah, it's just it's an interesting topic, and it's interesting because like our fishes here in the U.S., our native fish are very sought after over in like Europe and other countries and such. So it's just kind of interesting how we don't. I think the Amazon Research Center just said, they use fathead minnows for toxicity studies. Yes, that's a perfect example. So it's, I don't know. It's just really interesting. I feel like native fish should be more popular in the aquarium trade than what they are, but I think it all just comes down to accessibility, really. How many who's going to start breeding these fishes for when there's not a well-known demand for them right off the bat, or you know what I mean? There's not really a single person.
Who's gonna breed the ugly fish? Is what you're saying?
Well, they're not. You see, that's the thing. Is like people
Beauty in
see.
every fish.
And
It's
I
the
can't believe-
personality that counts for me. I mean,
Yes.
it's no.
Look at how many silvery barbs there are in the trade, though, or they only color up, or like some of like your African cichlids. Yeah, they have some really nice color to them, and but like you only ever see their really bright, fiery side when you have the right, male to female ratio, or they're old enough, or whatever the case is. So I don't know. It's pretty cool. There's some really neat species out there. So start with your pygmy sunfish, and then try and source some native species, or sometimes even going to your local bait store, you can find other species accidentally mixed in, and you can still purchase them that way. Biggest thing is just don't ever re-release anything in the wild, but that goes for tropical fish too, right? That's it should be common knowledge, but unfortunately here in Illinois we have dojo loaches that have been naturalized into the Des Plaines River, right? And that's up here in northern Illinois, where we do get
They taste really good though.
Do they? Someone posted a photo on a local fishing group here in the Chicagoland area, and I kid you not, it was the fattest dojo loach that was like a foot long, and the thing was like literally like you stack about like 8 bratwursts together and tie it around, and that's how thick it was. The thing was a unit, an absolute.
Must be a Wisconsin thing when you're taking measurements in bratwursts. Huh?
They're farmed for food.
I was going to say they're like French fries. They fry them up.
They skewer them.
Oh,
and they dip them in oil, and then they hold them over an open flame, and back into the oil over the open flame, and it's like it's food. It's a very common food.
Pretty sure people there's some folks that eat like creek chubs up here too. They'll just fry them up whole and then just eat them. It's like some sardines or something like that. So it's just like in Peru, I was down there for about a week and a half, and I mean, so many of the ornamental species.
That's where I had them.
Just really just everyday meals. I mean, that's just what is caught and what is commonly ate. It was really cool. I really enjoyed walking around the markets down there. That's super neat. Seeing all the tiger shovel nose and everything that was just regular everyday food, and pleco soup and all that jazz. So I don't know. It's interesting.
So tell us a little bit about the Aqua Gallery. I know you do the shows, and let's talk about. It's so funny because I'm glad we started off with that, because like I can tell from social media and just knowing you, like you're a great guy to meet at shows, but like when you post your wild stuff, like you could tell like that's your passion. Like you're having fun at those points, sharing that type of stuff. So
yeah, it's an interesting, when you work in the aquarium industry, when you work in your hobby, it's a very I don't know, it's an interesting way of making a living, I guess you could say. You kind of you do your work, and then you have your hobby on the side too. So even though I may be talking about filters on a regular basis, I use those filters, but for the native fish tanks and for my rainbow shiner tanks and things like that, or for the tank that I still have some of my wild caught nanostomus pencil fish from Peru and stuff. But the Aqua Gallery though is a really cool conglomeration of effort from a bunch of different guest scapers that come in. So let me start here. It's housed at Aquashella, so it is a booth that is sponsored by Oase and Aqualife. And Aqualife provides the tanks, a lot of the lights, or pretty much all the lights, the hardscape materials, the substrates, everything. I mean, their website, they have a full breadth of products. They're really cool, nice rimless tanks. I mean, really low iron glass. I mean, super sleek tanks. This is not just a plug. It's I use their tanks at home a lot too, just because they're very affordable. And then on top of that, they're probably some of the best craftsmanship that I've seen on the market over the years, and all that jazz as far as rimless tanks go. And they have a bunch of really cool sizes too, which suits my needs quite a bit. But But yeah, so Awase provides the filters primarily, and heaters as well too, and it's just kind of a booth that's also sponsored by like Tropica and other companies that pitch in to provide fish, plants, other means of livestock, things like that, such as like Seahorse Savvy, which usually provides me with all the macroalgae, and sponsors like the Seahorse tank that Nick Kinsler usually does at the booth, or like the Nano Reef tank with all the gorgonians from Florida and from the Keys and stuff that Jen put together at this last one. But it's a really cool booth because the idea behind it is you have product on display and everything, but more so than that, it's just to show kind of what is able to be done in the aquarium industry and show all these really cool niches that all of us scapers at the event and at the booth are very passionate about, right? So, I'm passionate about macroalgae tanks, so I usually do a macroalgae tank. Melanie Holmes is very talented when it comes to blackwater botanical setups, and she does a great job with those. Which, I mean, there's a lot of different approaches, so it's really hard. It would be really hard for one person to come in and do all these different styles, just because there's so much to know and different nuances with all these different types of tanks and stuff. Right, and Chance came in at the Dallas show and he did a wonderful, what was it, 12-gallon long, right, Chance, or was it a 20-gallon long?
It was the 13-gallon bookshelf.
Yeah, the 13, and I love that scape and your use of boost flandria on the hardscape and everything like that, and just how full it looked as well too. So it's a really cool opportunity for the general public to come by and see and get inspired by all these different folks that come from all different walks of life. And, we all come from different areas, but we're all very passionate about it. I think we all share a lot of that same passion, and it's just embodied in the booth. So it's a neat walkthrough. You walk through, you see all these different tanks. A lot of the tanks in the center of the show are also auctioned off. We did some of the auction, and funds went to 1,000 Mermaids, Coral Restoration, Project Piaba, for South American sustainable fisheries, things like that. So just trying to give back a little bit too. So, just bring awareness to all different fronts, all different brands that are helping to put this on and inspire different people. I can't tell you how many people came up at this last Dallas show and were like, yeah, I'm actually more seriously looking into macroalgae tanks or things like that. I'm like, that's what it's about, getting people excited, getting them energetic, and sharing the, that passion and that, the excitement that we all have. So hopefully I didn't mumble too much about that.
No, that's one of the cool things is you can always go up to the booth and you get to see different styles, different interpretations, even different scapers. And, like you said, blackwater, everything like that. Like Chance has a unique style and he does his stuff like, with a lot of arches and flow and going with it. Like you said, his 13-gallon tank was amazing. And that's a hard thing, like a hard dimension to escape.
My favorite thing is the little demonstrations and classes that you guys set up in the middle of the shows. Like I'll be running to go get water or something like that, and I'll be like, oh, George or Jeff is just doing like a demonstration, and you've got like 10 of these random people just like this, like, oh man, I'm so interested in what they're saying and learning and getting into it. So.
But it's not people that had it on their calendar of like, I'm going to go to this thing. So like you can see like, it starts off with only a few people. And like, as it goes on, like there's more and more people that just stop and watch and listen. And it's so cool to see that in the hobby. Like, especially it's complicated what they're explaining in a simple way.
Well, and the coolest part is some of these folks are people that would have looked at like one of these, really well-known contests or something like that, like some of the photograph contests for aquascaping and stuff like that. Those, I think we're all pretty aware that a lot of those tanks that are in some of those high-end scaping contests and things like that, they're only up for X amount of months, and they're not a long-term solution or manageable long-term, right? You're setting it up
for about 6 months on average.
Yeah, you're doing it for the photo as opposed to have in your family room or in your house for a long term. So the cool thing about the gallery is that everyone puts these tanks together literally in a day or two, so you're kind of strained on time. You don't really you can plan it out, but until you have the materials in front of you, right? It depends upon how you work. I like to sketch things out a lot in a sketchbook, and I have like a whole multiple sketchbooks of all these different ideas, wabi kusa little glass jars and different arrangements. But until you actually have the materials to use for it, a lot of those sketches you can just rip out of that book and burn, because like it's never gonna it never transitions from a sketch directly to real life, because the materials are always different. So it's neat because people's talent and also their their style really comes out at this event, because they only have a limited amount of time, and
people can watch them.
Yeah, but to your point,
yeah.
To your point, Grant, they do a bunch of talks. So George and Jeff and Jen sometimes will do these little talks throughout the day. So at 1:00, you come by the booth, and Jeff will be talking about how to look at your hardscape and spend time with your hardscape and really get a feel for how to fit it together and work with it and things like that. George may be talking about who knows how to plant, all these different topics and things like that when someone is getting into the aquascaping hobby, so to speak, those things can be very intimidating. I don't even think I know how to properly trim stem plants still. And I've been trimming them for years and things like that. But to be able to even get them so that way you can clip them, so you get the two nodes splitting off from the single cut at the right place to be able to get the right bushy height. I mean, that takes a lot of practice and time. So to be able to have like a small talk to point you in the right direction, or at least make it less intimidating, or sometimes they'll do equipment talks, and that's another cool thing about the booth is all the equipment is there. If you want to take it apart, check it out, see how one of the filters works or anything like that, that's what it's there for. Same thing with the tanks and the scape. You see all the elements of it, and it makes it a little less intimidating, I feel, for people that are getting into it, and trying to figure it out for themselves at home.
So I want to remember this question, but I don't want to answer it yet. I want to come back to macroalgae in a second. Just can bring it down.
I'm gonna lose it.
Before I forget, Brian's back. And before we chug along with other things, talk about your collection of antique tanks, because I am quite jealous of it.
Oh,
so
I should have just had one prepared right here. Okay, so I've always been really interested in like the aquarium history hobby, because I've always kind of been like a generalist. I feel I don't know. I don't know. I kind of float around from topic to topic in the aquarium. I feel like we all kind of do to some extent, right? Like we all like Killies one year, and then the next year we're really into whatever new tetras from Brazil or something like that, right? Or you're into all those at the same time, right?
Yeah, you just keep adding new things.
Yeah. But there is I don't know. I found my limit.
I actually have a frame of my own.
Oh, nice. See, Brian's got it going. He already took the panes out and everything. You just got to clean up some of that pecora on the frame.
I've got a 55-gallon frame in my shed that just sitting there.
Does it have the center brace still?
Yeah, it does.
Nice. That's half the battle right there, is finding with the center brace. So as far as like vintage aquariums go and everything like that,
I brought a lizard in with me.
There it is. You take some barkeeper's friends with a moist rag and go over that stainless steel on the rust, and it'll take it off. And you'll be brand new. It'll be so sparkly and fresh. It'll look nice. But I've recently even got into a even more dangerous affliction with. I try not to collect too much. I'm literally looking at my bookshelf that's overflowing. I've got stacks of everyone's different aquarium books and everything like that. My girlfriend is going to kill me if I bring home any more metal frame tanks. That's for sure. Yeah. So until we get into an actual house or something like that, more are going to have to wait. I come across them all the time when I'm traveling. So for those that don't know, in the aquarium industry here in the U.S. and also over in Europe, but mostly here in the U.S., most every single aquarium that was made from the 30s to the late 70s generally were mainly stainless steel metal frames.
With a slate bottom.
Yep, with a slate bottom, and more in the 60s and 70s, some companies were starting to use glass then as well for the bottom. So I've got a lot of the 60s and 70s style metal frame tanks. Primarily, Meta Frame was one of the most prominent brands. I also have some Pemco tanks, which was seen as a little bit of a higher quality brand at the time, but they were also more towards the end of that era. More so when they kept the metal frames around, mainly just for aesthetic purposes for people that were, from that age range that like that look and stuff. But primarily when you used to walk into your aquarium store in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, it was filled to the brim with just stainless steel tanks. They had all sorts of crazy sizes. And, they were all sealed, not with silicone, but with like a linseed oil pecora. So it was like kind of like a tar, basically, that it was sealed with. So when you find them these days, a lot of times that pecora is dried out or cracked, so a lot of times,
leak.
yeah. And even if you seal them, it's bound to possibly leak.
It's the worst. Like they're trying to reseal them is like one of the hardest tasks. Like that's why the 55's in there, because like it's just got a little pinhole leak that I've like tried to seal 10 times, and
there's a couple different sealants on the market that you can use aside from silicone.
The cool thing about those is that they come in a really like the 2.5 and 5 gallon size even. If you're lucky, those are usually the ones that people can store on top of a shelf and stuff. But
check Facebook Marketplace, check Craigslist. You'll find them around and whatnot in varying degrees of repair and things.
Just make an offer because people think it's worth more than it actually is.
Yeah, some people look at eBay prices, and eBay prices they're worth what you're willing to pay for them. But some people, there definitely are some that are rarer and some brands that are less common and sizes that are less common. Pemco had these really cool, like 15-gallon tall tanks where they were literally like 30 inches tall, but only like 5 or 6 inches wide. And then they would be like 20 inches tall, right? It was pretty awesome. I mean, that's for maybe like really small tetras or like live bearers, and then display your aponogetons or whatever tall plants that you have. But there's some really neat sizes. I'm really working on trying to get some of mine fixed up. I just ordered some different sealant that can adhere to the slate bottom because silicone doesn't stick to the slate.
Let me know.
Well, what a lot of people will do is actually get a piece of glass cut to sit over the slate, so that way you can keep the original slate bottom, but then just seal it in, right?
Yeah, that was my next option.
Yep. So you just do that with some Dow 795 black silicone, which is what they use for skyscrapers. I use also the Psycha Flex 1A, but you need to use that with the primer. So you do the primer and then you do the Psycha Flex, and that's again for, I believe, window sealant and things of that nature, heavy duty. But that comes in a variety of different colors. But yeah, the metal frame tanks is just cool. I mean, it was really not the beginning, because you also have the 1800s where you had all the cast iron tanks. There were even tanks made out of zinc, which
it's vintage Americana, I would say. Like, it's what every kid remembers their goldfish being in, and from that era.
So it's just really cool. I am a big fan of them just because I grew up on the forums, specifically like Wet Web Media. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that. Unfortunately, Bob Fenner passed away a couple of years ago, but I wasn't really going to like high school parties. I was literally at home kind of like on my computer, like typing emails to Neil Monks over in the UK and Bob Fenner, asking them every single question they could probably imagine. And they probably were pretty annoyed with me probably because I probably was asking questions that were already being asked. So note to self, if you're new to the aquarium hobby, do your research because, it's just, it goes a long way. Do your research
before you ask questions. That's the thing is like, I've come across people that are young at shows and become mentors to them just because they sat around and they thought about it before they asked the next question. And it's fun to have, the next generation finding, people that they can talk to, and being those type of people.
Yeah. So I've developed a knack for collecting metal frame tanks, and every time I say I'm not going to buy one, when I see it in the area that I'm traveling to, it somehow ends up in my car, or I see it out on their front porch and it's already been paid for, and so it's just, hey, John, are you going to pick that up? I'm like, oh yeah, twist my arm,
Slip and fall and find a tank. It happens.
Yeah, so I've got quite a few, and I've got some really fun ideas that I'm going to work on. And I'm not going to go on the tirade of I'm going to start a YouTube or anything like that, because it's very time intensive, and I already have a full-time job, and it's just I don't know. I'd like to share that with people somehow. So maybe I'll do a series on any of the social media platforms or something like that, because there's something really classic about a metal frame tank that is just planted with some very, like corkscrew valve and different valves, and just some of those plants that were most common back at that time frame. There's a look to it. There's like an aesthetic with it that I really, really like. I don't know. It's just my personal preference. I've actually gotten rid of several rimless tanks just to be able. That's another thing too. Is they're like one of the one rim tanks that I think looks really nice with a lid on it, because you usually won't see the lid, or if you just do a piece of glass or greenhouse corrugated plastic or something like that, like it's pretty discreet when you have the metal frame. But the metal frame,
I'll say Skyline tanks remind me of the old school. I can't wait for those to like actually come into the States.
I've got
and if you want a channel to share, just do what I do and use Grant and Chance's channel.
There we go. Well, when I get some more tanks up and going and whatnot, maybe we can do a tour or something on
a live stream with them.
Yeah. I'll get my Wi-Fi boosted down in the basement, and we'll walk you guys around, and I'll have a portable camera, or do it from my phone or something. But Chance, to your point, I have one of the old trade show Highline 175 liters, which is 46 gallons, and
awesome.
I'm a big fan. It's very European style because it has the drilled hole for the drain, but it has the dry overflow box for the return line. Yeah. I'm planning on setting that up as like a. Well, you'll have to see in the future. I'll leave that one on a cliffhanger. But the concept behind that is going to be about movement, and how can you achieve that with plant and fish choice as far as that goes. Because it's a very fun tank, but I try to set my things up these days to be low maintenance, or relatively easy to maintain, just because I'm gone for week after week. So high energy tanks are a little bit challenging when you can only do water change, every Saturday. It depends.
How many tanks do you have currently running?
Actually, not many. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Are we counting like killifish?
I love when you get to 5 and you're like, not many.
How many bases of water do you have, or what I mean?
It's still too many. It doesn't matter. It's always going to be too many.
I do the same things. I don't even count my 150 gallon ponds anymore.
I'm not going to count the tanks that I just have fish in, which inevitably end up having plants in, but it's more like plant holding than anything else. So all the tanks for the killies that I brought home, I'm not going to count those. So actual tanks that are have canisters or hang on the backs or any sort of
we're
filter.
Not your girlfriend.
What was that?
Yeah, we're not your girlfriend. You can give us a real number.
Well,
you're I can't count this one. No,
what you really can't ask me is, how did the 250-gallon breeder metal frame tanks get into the basement that's covered with a moving blanket in the far corner of the basement? I don't know how those got there, but
slip and fall.
Yeah, it just happened. So right now roughly about 5 tanks or so. So it's nothing. I mean, it's nothing crazy, but I need to reconsolidate and kind of figure out what I'm doing, especially with AGA approaching. I really want to nab some fun plants, and I don't know. I'm just really fond of just growing plants and having that really densely packed jungle tank, and just having a couple of nice fish in there that are fun to watch. To me, that's relaxing. You know what I mean? Scape tanks are fun too, but I think the process of scaping them is a lot of fun, as opposed to just the maintenance involved as well too. But
the high growth maintenance is just stressful.
It's so fun though when you get it going the right way, and you
It
can
looks,
just
yeah.
even just when you get it, where it's you have your CO2 pumping, you have your lights going on their cycle, you have your dosing going, and you can keep it in that cycle and going, and you're just trimming and replacing and keeping nutrients where they need to be and CO2 where they need to be. Oh my God, that's so much fun. Being able to pull out like half a pound of plants from a single tank and be able to send that to, your club or your fans, or not fans, your friends in the club or things like that. Like it's a blast. I love sharing stuff.
man.
I'll bring stuff to stores too when I go on runs. I just, sometimes you just got to get rid of stuff and it's not convenient with the local plant club meetup times and things like that. So, yeah.
Well, I don't know why Dr. Anthony is throwing $10 our way when he's got leaky tanks to deal with, but
Nice.
had to throw that in there. Shelby was itching. You should have seen her. She's like, I'm gonna bring it up. So
I should have brought my computer down in the basement. I've got a little bit of a disco ball going down there for those nights
They
when you
always catch me.
Yeah. You got to have some mood lights down there.
Start playing music. That's my jam.
Yeah. Well, so like, what projects are you guys working on? Grant, I know you're always adding tanks, more shrimp, but is there anything that you guys are working on? And then Chance and Brian, you guys have any new tank setups that you're cooking or working on?
I'll let them go first.
Okay.
Chance hasn't said anything for a minute.
I got a few things going on. I got a Paludarium install at Badfish this Friday.
Oh, nice.
Demo install kind of dealio. It's really cool. I got the hardscape all done today. I'm gonna kind of just do the detail work of it and the planting and go over filtration and stuff with whoever's there, and then kind of just talk about what I did hardscape wise. I didn't want to take like a crap ton of time to build out the hardscape because I made it was like super complex and I didn't want to sit there and like take all day to do that. But I wanted it to look good, so I took my time on it. Anyway, I'll just kind of like break down pointers on what I did. And then in the end of September, there's a little new aquarium festival, I guess, called Skelly Fest. I'm going to be doing an hour-long demonstration for introduction to aquascaping for, I guess, as a speaker event thing there, which will be cool. So we're going to have 5 tanks set up where people can, basically take instruction that I'm going to give on how to make just an easy, simple, entry-level beginner tank and go from there. Just all the basics of aquascaping, with some plant tips and stuff like that too.
That's awesome. So, I'm glad that worked out for you.
Yeah. Thank you for throwing that my way. I appreciate it.
I mean, it's Miami. I figured you wouldn't mind doing a little drive.
Yeah, well, it's pro bono, but anything to help grow the hobby.
Well, but I told you that before. It's her first show.
Do a table there too?
Take care, yeah.
No. No. So I'm also stepping away from doing retail plant sales, big time. I'm going to be leaning more towards design, aquarium maintenance, and things like that.
Nice.
I mean, the nursery stuff, all that stuff's fun, but in order to really be competitive in that market, you really have to have a lot of money to dump into technology and things to automate, or you have to hire people and pay them like crap. Otherwise, you can only do so much in a day. Like I was up to 4 greenhouses and managing 263 different species of plants, and I wasn't able to take that time and then advertise and build a business at the same time, as well as do YouTube stuff. Like that's just too much. So I'm kind of just going to step back and do the design and aquascape aspect stuff. That's what got me into wanting to learn how to grow plants in the first place. It's just the science aspect grabbed my brain and took it, down that whole physics rabbit hole that I lived my life in. and just changed it into chemistry and biochemistry.
It
So,
happens.
And you're in the right area for that.
yeah, there's lots of good things going on in my life as far as where I'm located and what I want to do. So, and then there's also potential other aspects of me working alongside you
Me?
with a
Or
no,
him? Or
no,
him.
that one. With Oase, so we'll see where that pans out. And then there's also something on the table from JBJ. So I don't know where life's going to take me, but there's lots of doors open, and I'm just kind of sitting back and being like water and seeing what comes my way. I'll just flow wherever it goes.
What about you, Brian?
Yeah, Chance, hit me up afterwards because I got some connections down there for you. But anyways, I've got this tank. It's still at the same place. I've got schools back to school stuff. So I've been working. We usually give away AquaChar to anybody that has a classroom, to any teacher that has a classroom tank. So got that been going on. This is one of my kids' teachers in their afternoon. She does like VPK or whatever it is. She's got the bio orb.
Yeah.
Actually, the light went out on it, but I might have to hit Johnathon up and talk to him about it.
We'll get you covered. No worries.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, I've been doing the classroom tanks. Actually, my kids' school, their theme this year is Under the Sea. So I promised both of my kids' teachers at orientation that I'd get them a classroom tank. But I've got enough tanks sitting around in my shed and my yard and wherever I find them. And yeah, I'm going to set that up and do that. Other than that, just kind of, I've been working on some remediation stuff. Got a project this weekend, I'm going with my kids this weekend to do some cleanup with some people here locally for a remediation project. So other than that, just kind of been busy.
Nice. Well, that sounds cool. A lot of cool stuff going on.
Awesome.
What about you, Shelby?
Oh, we got a lot going on. Currently started painting the rack that's going in the middle of the living room. So I got like 14 of the 8-foot long 2x4s done. It's been a long time in Florida because it's raining almost every day. So I only get a chance from when I get off of work till the sun goes down, and hopefully it's not raining that day. So, and on top of that, I'm just trying to breed all my fish and trying to like kind of hone in on some of them. Already breeding my tequila goodeids. Not some of my other goodeids are just babies still, so I still got to raise them in order to breed them. I did start a video for breeding Nothiobranchus Zanzibars, the egg-laying killifish that are annuals, so that you have to dry out the eggs and hold them for 3 to 6 months. So I started. It was a tragic beginning, but so far so good. They seem interested. I just think my females are just not sexually mature enough yet.
You made it sound like something died, though.
No,
tragic as in she just made a mess.
Oh man, the tank just blew up with peat. So I tried to do it so nicely, and then I turn around and the whole thing's just like a big bomb of peat moss everywhere.
Sounds much better than like 14 pairs died on the first day.
And I am trying to breed some of my other Achilles fish. I gotta figure out what they're needing. Some of them might need a smaller tank, but that's what the new rack is supposed to be, is me moving these fish and figuring out what they need. I did find out I have 2 males of my blue Galaris today, so nice. I'm not too happy about that. Yeah, it was sold to me as a pair. And then I looked in the tank, it just now colored up. They're definitely 2 males, or I have the most beautiful female in the world, honestly. Like, that'd be insane. But I do have another pair, so thankfully I bought 2 pairs at the show.
And she won't let me do water changes on any of her fish tanks.
Don't touch it. No, I'm a little particular because I want them to be scraped and the sponge filters to be clean. They're different than the shrimp. Shrimp, we could just do the change, you know. I have to vacuum up some of the food that I left behind. I overfeed sometimes, so I just got to make sure like every little detail is clean on the tank. It bothers me if I don't do it that way. So I need to move it onto another rack so that he doesn't have to worry about it anymore in the middle of his shrimp changes, because he has to skip tanks. So it's driving him nuts. I'm like, don't touch them. I will do them when I come home from work.
Well, the new rack that I've already set up already has babies that I need to split up into new tanks, and I don't have new tanks because of her fish. Her fish
which are also
Way
breeding.
too many tanks.
So I'm also having too many tanks taken. I think I have 3 tanks of tequilas now, and then we have another tank that's starting with the dwarf cories.
The high-fin platy babies.
Yeah, platy babies. And then I'm about to have a ton of guppy babies, different dragon guppies. And then I have, there's just certain things. We have so many things going on that I need to split them up into that rack. Like he's got to give me the whole new rack. That's why I'm painting it.
So when are you guys going to buy the house next door to move your tanks into?
I wish. They're never going to move. Those people have been there forever. Kim is I could probably talk our neighbor Kim into like letting me have a room in her house. You know, like a little rack. I'll be like, oh, come
I love
over,
where this conversation went. Like,
reptiles.
that's not.
Are you moving out now? Like, is it for
Like,
you?
the property behind us like sold, and they like built a really nice house, and then it just never sold because of like somebody kept shooting the back windows out with paintball guns or something.
Oh.
Wow.
You know,
Wonder who did that.
You know, there's paintballers in the area, you know.
Price just went down, and you know, he scooped it up for a good deal. But
Shucks.
yeah.
I got to get comfortable. I'm sorry.
It's cute. Lay on the dog. It's a good pillow.
I am.
And then I have had Shelby had to snipe out the view. Yeah, I would have stopped today, but I slacked and forgot that I ran out of newspaper and had to run to the store. Instead of, we could have gone to Real King again today and gotten another 140-gallon Rubbermaid tub, or I don't think a Rubbermaid, but
no.
we've already maxed 2 of them out with all the Eros and Crips that we got from Chance at the Aquascape contest.
So much. We planning it. I'm like, did he mean to give us this many?
There's,
holy cow.
and then of course Shelby is like, no, you need to plant them exactly how I want them. And I'm like, I know how you want it. You're going to want me to piece every single one apart and plant them and plug it up. So
he did good. He did good.
Yeah.
Didn't let me down.
She said it was going to take 8 hours. It probably only took 3, but
if you ever need a plant, that's the plant to go. That is like the perfect plug and play. Chance came in clutch with the perfect plants, and they were so extremely healthy that the roots were like, as long as my hair almost, it felt like. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do?
So here's the argument: were they grown immersed or submerged?
No, those are submerged. They're Erios. I grew them submerged to yeah.
That's
those were sub.
Wow.
The Crips
that I don't think
Crips,
made it were the like skinny, like hair grass looking ones.
Yeah,
By
the
the
Crips
way-
were immersed.
If anybody needs some really cool plants, hit Chance up because he's got some amazingly healthy plants on sale right now.
Chance just shook his head no. Like, don't hit me up. I don't want to do it anymore.
No, you can hit me
He'll
up.
take the money.
I got a few things left. But
transferring it.
Mainly buy my terrestrials so I can break down to 1 greenhouse. I'm still going to keep species of plants. I'm actually going to go to supplying bad fish, like the plants for there, and then
that's incredible.
Have a
just
local
break
outlet.
down to that.
We gotta
and
have
then-
her on one of the talks. She's incredible. Like one of the youngest people to open up her own store. Like it's just incredible.
The husbandry and everything that's involved and what makes everything work is what's
That's what
really
I've always
incredible.
noticed about her. The husbandry. You can
I wanna
tell
know
the
her
shop's about
story.
the husbandry.
And the knowledge that's there
Yeah.
is second to none. So
That's right.
So, Jonathan, what you got going on? Or Grant?
Dude.
I just said it. My ponds and water changes, man. That's it. And until I get caught up in the water changes in the house, I can't do the leak. And my dad, I just talked to him 2 days ago, and I told him, like, Dad, it's gonna take me like 10 or at least a week and a half before I can get to the leak. And yeah, 2 days later, he's like, "You get a chance to look at that yet?" And I'm like, "Dad, look, Yeah, at least like another 10 days of water changes before.
All
my
dads are
pillow
the same.
left.
What'd you say, Chance?
My pillow left.
Oh, rude.
It's a cute pup.
But so Jonathan, back to the macroalgae.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that one.
I had a few questions. I know you said do your research, but
Whatever you can grow.
you're the research tonight.
Okay.
All right.
I'll do my best.
So, I was always interested in keeping the slugs, the newbies,
Mhm.
and you know,
The nudes.
yeah. And
I can send you some
Send
nudes.
me
Greg.
nudies. That's
Yeah.
the shirt that shows.
Chance,
I never really wanted to do all the chemicals and treatments and everything, but you travel. So how many macroalgae tanks do you run at your house?
Right now, I just have 2. I have a 30-gallon shallow tank. It's 24 by 24 by 10 inches. No, 12 inches tall. And that's just kind of like a holding tank more so than anything else.
Does it have a mango tree in the middle?
No, but I think that's kind of where it's probably going to go. Because I do have a mangrove in the back chamber of one of my all-in-one tanks, one of the Aqualife tanks, and it's getting a little too big for that. And, those roots I don't want to push out or crack anything. So I'm going to redo that tank, I think, because I have one of the lights from Nilcog G or Colin Grice, who does the Thrive fertilizer. They're kind of like black box units,
Yeah,
And so I have on the other side, I have 2 systems that are the same 30-gallon. One's a plant grow out, and then one's kind of like a macroalgae holding tank. The macro tank, I want to take everything out. I'm going to stack some rock in the back and just kind of create more of an estuarian sort of tank where I'll have mangroves poked in on the rocks, but then also have macros mixed in with the roots and things like that. So that way the mangroves take the brunt of the lighting, so that way it shades it out a little bit. So a lot of your red macros. So with macroalgae generally, I mean, this is a very general sense. There are red macros that can take some light, but for the most part, if you're just getting into it, think of your green macros as like your high light macros, or the ones that can appreciate high light and tolerate it. And then your reds generally are needing more shaded or moderate to low lighting in that case.
So
right?
opposite of a planted tank.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
However, there's obviously subjects to, like Chance mentioned earlier, there are some macros that are way more demanding or different. You basically have 3 different types of macroalgae. You have the red macros, the green macros, and the brown macros, which the brown macros sometimes are not brown. They have some really cool coral colors in them as well too, and things like that. But yeah, you can generally think about it that way. So the 30-gallon is going to become sort of like an easy mangrove tank. I just saw a comment pop up. Someone, Energize Aquatics, asked, which macroalgae do you recommend for beginners? There's quite a few that you can get. Most of the ones that you find online are generally going to be pretty hardy or safe. So Caulerpas is a genus of macroalgae. They're the kind of like feathery looking ones. They kind of grow like stem plants, or they grow along a rhizome, right? And so they'll carpet kind of. So you provide them with enough nutrients, lighting. That's like your Caulerpa prolifera, which is like probably the most common species that you'll find at most marine shops that they're running in their refugium, along with Chiatomorpha and a couple other species. So any of your Caulerpas, Caulerpa prolifera, Caulerpa, there's a really cool one, Paspatoides or Paspaloides. It's the palm tree Caulerpa.
Yes.
That one is really cool. It gets like 4 inches. It shoots out the rhizome, so you can clip it at the rhizome and put another piece somewhere else that you want. Or just
I think Chance actually posted that the other day.
Yeah, and I'll have to take a look. But yeah, it's that one's a really fun one too. So a lot of your Caulerpas are going to be really easy to maintain. They grow fast. They can kind of melt back. Those are also the ones that when you hear of macroalgae going sexual, it's just a reproduction strategy, really, when water quality or the environment is low on nutrients, or they need to spread.
Or too much light.
Or too much light. They're responding to some stimulus that they don't like.
Yeah.
So usually if you change something really abruptly, which is kind of the cool thing about macro tanks is they're pretty smooth sailing. You can get away with water changes once a week or once every couple of weeks, you know, depending upon your fish load and your invertebrate load and things like that and how bright your lighting is. But you can keep them relatively, you know.
Are they like a coral tank where you have to adjust the alkalinity and magnesium like every day, or
You need some of those elements in the water, but you don't need, unless if you're using the calcified algae like the halmidias and things like that can sap and use the calcium and the carbonate hardness in the water for their structure, much like corals do, right? As long as you don't have a tank filled with those, you generally don't have to worry about too many of your water quality requirements that are needed. Typical water changes, as well as if you're dosing anything like Aquavitro's Chiato-Grow or their line of phosphate additives, nitrate. It's primarily phosphates and nitrates that actually get run out the fastest and get exhausted.
It's the same as a planted tank. Like
Exactly.
you're gonna have variances of difficulty as far as species that you choose. Like you have the Eriocalans, and then you have the Rotala rotellifundrias. Like it's just.
And like with a planted tank, the more heavily planted it is, the more nutrients you have to pump in there to sustain the growth, as well as continue the plants to grow as well too. It's just the same as planted tank. You can trim macros as well too. I mean, a lot of them, they have multiple reproduction strategies, and releasing their gametes by going sexual is one way. Fragmentation is the most common way. You know. That's why some macroalgae are actually quite delicate, because, you know, when you're moving them around and stuff, you'll notice they pop apart really easily. And that's there's a whole new organism essentially right there. It's very similar. So it's really cool. It's almost like an in-between between corals and plants in that way, but obviously more closely related to plants, right? So.
Well, but like that's like a natural process, is them breaking apart and stuff like that, because the ocean's so big, and you know,
the tides, the waves, everything.
It's a way for them to get around and spread and reproduce.
Yeah.
Everywhere that I've found them so far, they've been in pretty rough, rocky areas. The longer species have been like in estuary style areas and stuff like that, and more closer to mangrove estuary.
Yeah,
but those have been like the longer streety, longer, weedier looking ones. The really cool ones have been like in the really rough areas.
Oh, they take a lot of flow and everything like that. Like,
well, a lot of the seagrasses are found more in the shallow, where the light intensity is really strong, and you have that finer substrate mix as well too.
I think you touched on this, but like, what kind of lighting do you run on it? Do you do any of the blues with like salt water, or do you just do like a planted light?
I just use planted lights, so it's great. If you have a planted tank and you want to try a macroalgae tank, literally the same equipment, even, you know, it's all applicable for the same purposes.
So just switching it over to salt and getting your salinity right,
do they like higher flow?
See what you can
grow.
grow.
Maker do better for a macroalgae tank, or is it not needed?
You don't need like crazy high flow, really. It's not like you need the same flow that you need for like a small polyp stony coral tank, where they do need that really heavy direct / partially indirect flow. You know what I mean? You can keep. The cool thing, it's just the same with plants, right? So like you want a good amount of circulation, so that way nutrients are cycling through the tank. You don't have dead spots where there's no water movement, things get stagnant or debris collects, etc. It's the same concept with a planted tank. You want just to have an ample amount of flow where you can see some water movement. A lot of macroalgae are extremely adaptable to different amounts of flow. I mean, Chance, like you mentioned, there's so many macros that are found in those intertidal zones where water is literally crashing up against the rocks. When I was down in the Keys last spring, I was really surprised to find some pretty delicate macros, even in some of those zones and those tidal zones where they're getting beat up. You know,
but there's just something about where they are, though, that they don't get hit by the tide. Like they just know to grow there.
Yeah, so here's something interesting. So if you don't have a reference point, so a lot of macros before like these macro tanks became popular, they were used in refugiums. So like I have an ambassador group for Aquachar, and we were actually talking about this week. And one of the guys is using it keeping his light on 24/7 to be able to decreases pH because he thinks pH consumption and stuff like that. And I tried to explain the whole respiratory cycle and photosynthesis, but yeah, their overall belief was that, you know, from a pH standpoint, usually the CO2 like there's some benefit of having a respiration cycle, but a lot of reef hobbyists, they'll have a little pump, like a system in their system, and at least they have 18 hours of light on it, mostly to absorb a nutrients that corals can't uptake because they don't store it like plants as much.
I mean, that makes sense in a, you know, biochemical standpoint. I mean, in the sun, even in like a natural standpoint, like the sun, you're basically holding the plant in photosynthesis. I mean, the sun isn't 8 hours. Like the sun's a lot longer than that. So
you're making it summertime.
And there's parts of the world where the sun is a lot longer than that. So I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, 24-hour light, I suppose maybe parts of the world at some points in time, but
I just
Lieberg's law, basically, like you're supplying the plant with ample light, so it's going to need to take more nutrients. That's basically it. Yeah.
So just so people understand, like with salt water, you're trying to get pH higher. Unlike when you have a CO2 injected system, you're basically measuring your adjustment phase. So, and they will use the photosynthesis as a mechanism to decrease their atmospheric pH absorption or carbonic acid absorption. So
basically load it with plants to get it up.
And and it's basically like they're harvesting it. So like they'll have a refugium box that has a light over it that they'll run it until it's full, pull half of it out, leave half of it in there, and just keep growing it as a nutrient control mechanism. It's a way of filtration. The same thing with the they do, like there's another one, they have like a sheet that's an algae turf scrubber. So they'll use algae in a specific box, which they usually do run it higher because if you're trying to promote algae in a box, then higher light's going to promote it in that area. So they'll do the same thing as a nutrient control mechanism from a plant standpoint.
Algae scrubbers, right? Do they typically try to grow specific species like Bryopsis and stuff in those these days?
They're looking for the hair algae type, which is more prominent on that one because it's the faster growing. So what they do is they just try to promote an optimal environment for growing algae with the light schedule and the trickle filters to be able to reduce their nutrients in the system from that standpoint.
Yeah.
So I deal with mostly shrimp, and
Oh,
one of the shrimp I deal with are Opoula, which are our brackish water shrimp. Is there any macroalgae that you think I could try in their tanks?
Yeah.
You can transfer macros to brackish water.
They're adaptable too.
Yeah,
that's one cool thing.
I don't know which exact species. I haven't done it myself. I'm pretty sure Scott Fellman, I believe, right, from Tannin Aquatics. I think he's currently doing a tank right now that kind of is he's adjusting. I saw him post something where he's adjusting macros or something to hyposaline or a lesser salinity, like 1.015 specific gravity salinity right now, or something like that. He's doing some sort of project with that. He does a lot of really cool like estuarian tanks / with his botanicals and his mangroves and things of that nature. But I'm pretty sure you can. I don't know enough about it because I haven't tried it myself. But there's also tons of different fish that you can use in that setting. Any of your molly species.
Well, it would be just shrimp because all those fish would destroy the Opoula.
I vaguely remember looking up online. Yeah, someone that did Opoula in a macroalgae tank, but I can't for the life of me remember any of the details. So I'm sure if you looked into it a little bit more, you definitely could. And it would just be a gradual process of bringing the macros that are hardiest or best suited for that down to that level, which really isn't that hard. It just takes some time.
And I imagine the Opoula could also take more on the saltwater side too, because their tank evaporates quite low. So yeah. Also, I had a friend who took Neocaridina and threw them in their clownfish tank, and they lived for several months.
Oh, wow.
So I got a couple things that I wanted to try in different macro.
Well, that's honestly that's another one that really hasn't been explored, because that estuary system, it's just the middle area where a lot of inhabitants can adjust to it, and even some of them breed better in it in that type of situation.
I don't mean to interject. There's a lot of really cool fish when you look at coastal areas, or I mean, any continent really that has a coastal area, it typically has some estuarian mixing where the inlets from,
because that's where the energy goes. Like,
I was actually recommended a pseudomugil species, the blue eyes, right? They're not really technically rainbow fish, but people classify them as that. But I think taxonomically they're not in that same group. It's just different. But there's a pseudomugil that's apparently very common along coastal areas that migrate, like kind of moves between freshwater, brackish, and full marine even.
There's full marine ones.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Gary Lang actually recommended it to me. He's going to be at AGA, and he's like, well, why don't you do these in a tank? And I'm like, well, I mean, that's a great idea. I never even knew that they existed. I knew that there were pseudomugil that tolerated salt and brackish water, but I didn't know to what extent. But yeah, apparently this species is commonly found throughout. They're very hardy, they're very adaptable, and they only get like 1.5 inches or something. So it's kind of like having like a little brackish water Medaka rice fish almost / pseudomugil.
That's a good, that's a good way to, if you think about it, macroalgae and rivers and streams and stuff like that. That's a good intermediary between, that's where a lot of that stuff happens, and they co-inhabit it. Even like the brackish shrimp need to have some of that salinity to be able to, really be able to breed. Like the monos and stuff like that. Like,
are they permanently living in that area, or are they like migratory?
The pseudomugil?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they're permanently around that.
Awesome.
It's like miles of that salinity with the tides and everything like that. So if you think about like a range type of thing,
and it's always varying too, depending upon where they are or where the currents and the water movement and things like that, because it's just a constant mixing. So it's never like a consistent like 1.018 or 1.020 when you're 2 miles from the mouth of the ocean or or the river.
Well, and we don't even know if they migratory towards the salinity. So like when I was at the springs, one of the cool things at Blue Springs that I was at this week is you can see the brackish St. Johns River and the line between the springs, and guess where all of the alligator gar hang out? Right there in that area, because fish are going in and out between seeing and not seeing.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. They can see the salinity, because if you ever had a saltwater tank and had to top it off, you can see fresh water going into, salinity. So that's basically what's happening on pretty much any river face or anything like that. So there's plenty of animals that specifically live their life in that area.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. I think someone just commented a minute ago. Luke Wang says, I have a macroalgae tank with the cyanodorsalis in it. They're great. Nice. Yeah, whoever highlighted that. Luke, if you're listening, is that the pseudomugil species? 'Cause that species name kind of sounds familiar. I think that's what Gary had recommended. That was a appropriate species. I could be wrong. I could pull up a Google tab real quick, but we don't have to get into all that. But there's, I don't know. I think that's the cool thing about getting into macroalgae is you have a wide range of those are them then. So that's the species that I was trying to refer to, but I don't have any experience with them personally, so I can't really talk much about them. From my understanding is though they're pretty hardy and adaptable, as most estuarian fish or eurythrine fish are. So it's cool stuff. Yeah, the macroalgae habitats, it's just fascinating. There's so many.
Well, it's a way for people that are looking to get into the hobby and like look at an area where the hobby's expanding and people aren't really looking, because like I told you earlier, or we talked about earlier, like it's really been the last 5 years that a lot of these macroalgae that are easier to grow, like even the dragon's breath and stuff like that. Like, that used to be as rare as you can find for years on end, just because it was the red one. But like for the long, so like it hasn't these tanks where they have a lot of different diversity and stuff as far as it goes with the macroalgae. You had to be really connected in the industry, and now it's readily available at your hands to be able to see what you can and can't grow.
Yeah, there's I think the availability thing has gone leaps and bounds, and I think more and more people that are doing macroalgae tanks, obviously that brings awareness to it and more people get interested. And that's what's so great about people doing the little nano tank sizes and things like that is it's very manageable, it's very easy to keep, it's a great transition between freshwater and saltwater aquaria, right? And as more demand grows, this is going to push more and more people to actually carry macros and bring more in and find more. Or, hey, this coral guy gets stuff in maricultured from here, and there's some macroalgae that's growing on the side of it. There's a new species that could be cultivated. I think most times people just saw macroalgae growing on corals as pests because they competed for space and
clean it off and dip it.
They just throw it in the tank or get it in a tank with a tang, and a tang will eat it because it's just seaweed salad for them, right? So it's cool stuff. And there's really just honestly, I would be thrilled to see someone do like a biotope brackish tank or a biotope aquarium.
Grant and Shelby, there you go.
Yeah,
with your shrimp, like you can definitely. I mean, you have enough to play around with, but I think you could definitely get the salinity up in the macro down to the point where you can have that brackish area that would work out.
Because Luke, if you're listening, correct me if I'm wrong, but those little pseudomugals, I mean, they've got some color on them, even for being a tiny. I mean, most pseudomugal do. And granted, there are some species that are really well known for having some beautiful colors. I personally really like the Gertrudes because of the blue and that kind of crisscross black pattern on them. But the ones that Luke is talking about in the chat, I mean, they're really, really cool. And again, that habitat I think is mostly well known for the big brutish snappers and things like that transfer between brackish and marine and. It'll happen in time, right? People will get interested eventually, or people will get bored of the.
Well, I've got to give you credit for credit's due. Like you're like the only ones doing the macroalgae tank at the shows and letting people actually seeing that that's a thing. Because like I remember like 10 years ago when I was really getting into plants that I had a saltwater tank. I always was like, that's what I want to do. Like combine both worlds. So like. For you guys to present that alongside like aquascapes and stuff like that, that's really cool to see because it kind of fulfills that fantasy of like, what if? Well, actually, people are doing that, and that's the inspiration I never had 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think that was one of the coolest experiences. Was the first Aquashella in Chicago. I did that little 10-gallon macro tank. And that's one of the ones that I still have going today.
And it's the one people remember.
Yeah, but it was cool because we had it on the same table so if you ever go to one of the Aquashellas, essentially we have a center table that it's like a circle that has a bunch of different tanks of all different styles. That's where like all the little nano tanks are. The sizes that are 20 gallons and under are on there. And then around the booth, we have bigger tanks. We'll have like the Oase Scaper line tanks and stand combos, as well as Aqualife's new stands and their tanks on it as well too. So it's really neat to see all those displayed. But on the center, I had this little 10-gallon macroalgae tank. And it wasn't until the last day of the show that I actually put like a saltwater shrimp in there because I had so many people coming up and asking me, well, what plants are you using? I don't recognize that Rotala. And it's like, well, it's not a Rotala. It's not even freshwater. It's actually a saltwater planted tank using decorative macroalgae. And the response that I got from some people was it was great. And it was a lot of fun being able to talk to people and expose people that were having freshwater tanks all their life and only been interested in freshwater. And they go, maybe I'll have to do one of those, right? So it's really neat. I don't know. It's just really neat. Luke, yeah, if you were at Triple Crown, I think there's that guy with like a couple bags of them, right? I think I was next to someone when they grabbed it. Maybe it was you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Small world.
No, yeah, it always is, right? That's the cool thing about the hobby is you know, and that's another thing about the Aqua Galleries. You can talk to pretty much anyone that set up a tank at that gallery at the show. Like, you know, George Farmer is there, Jeff Miyake is there, and they're more than willing. They're there to answer questions and to you know, get people interested and things like that. So it's a really cool event to go to. I'd encourage anyone, if anyone's in Chicago on October 8th and 9th, come on by, say hi. It's at the Schaumburg Convention Center in Schaumburg, Illinois. The
One of
Renaissance.
my favorite hotels.
Yeah, it's pretty
Beautiful.
swanky, bougie hotel. It's nice. The area around there is really nice. If you like metal, there's a really cool bar and grill nearby called Kuma's Corner. That's my favorite. It's my go-to. If you like metal music, that's kind of the atmosphere that they have there.
We'll have to go together, John.
Okay, thank you. Because I don't think Jeff was very Jeff. If you
I
see
can't picture Jeff in a metal bar.
No,
That would be hilarious.
I don't think it's his music taste, and shame on me for not asking ahead of time. But I mean, it's really like it's a good like farm to table kind of burger joint. Like they make their ketchup there. Like I'm a food guy, so you know, or I become a food guy over the years. And then I really like dark beers if we're talking alcohol and such. So yeah, no, we'll split away at some point. Chance we'll go grab something to eat. But yeah, someone also, Luke. Where did I just see it? Oh, hey, George. Yeah, if you pass by the booth, I'd probably talk with you. It was me and Jen Williams. And Jen Williams was also on your guys' podcast not too long ago as well, too. I think that was actually at the event or the day before the event. So
Yeah, a little bit before.
yeah. Luke. Anyway. Yeah, Luke, if you're going to AGA, I'll see you there. I'll actually I'll have a macroalgae tank there on display at the convention just to get kind of people interested and as a talking point and just to chat. So please come on up and let's talk. I'd love to hear how you're doing with the pseudomugil and yeah, if you ever get them to breed, let me know. So
hey, John Peeney will go to the metal bar with you.
Yeah, I know. I think one of our bonding points, me and him, was like we ended up finding out that we both listened to like this one band called Emery quite a bit growing up, and that was like one of my top 5 metal bands and things like that. And I looked at him like, you know who this band is? And he looked at me, he's like, you know who this band is? I'm like, yeah.
I stayed with him in Lisbon, him and his wife.
Yeah.
And his wife Carly. And one of the things I learned about him is he's got like a haunted house video that he made that went viral in Mexico that has like 3 million views.
That's great. That's cool. Yeah. No,
Fun fact.
There's a lot of good folks here in the Chicagoland area. I'm very fortunate to have like the Chicago Aquatic Plant Society local.
Yeah.
So anyone that's listening, the Chicago Aquatic Plant Society is the one that's hosting the Aquatic Gardeners Association. So you have the end of September, beginning of October is Aquatic Gardeners Association. If you're into aquatic plants, anything planted tanks, or just want to learn more, that is the convention for you. You can register online at their website at aquaticgardenersassociation.com or .net, or they're a nonprofit, so I don't know what the the little endpoint is there, but go check it out. It's going to be a fun weekend of convention talks. There's Nick Kinzer will be presenting on paludariums. You know, a lot of folks will just be there. So you can just get to meet a lot of really cool folks and stuff. I've never been to an AGA before, so I'm actually really looking forward to this because it's in my backyard. And, you know, I've only heard good things about these and how there's plants that you know, are beyond your wildest dreams, apparently. So I will see
awesome.
how that goes. Yeah. And then
AGA is fun.
You have Aquashella the following week. So that'll be fun as well, too.
Is AGA in the same hotel?
No, AGA is right down the road in one of, I believe, the Hyatt hotels. I think there's 2 Hyatt hotels in Schaumburg, and they're doing it at one of them. It's probably only like literally like a minute or 2 away from where the Schaumburg Convention Center is going to be. I want to say it's on Gulf Road. And it's also pretty cool. There's a couple of stores in the area too. So anyone that's planning on coming to either events, you've got Beyond the Reef. That's right up the road, right on Gulf and Roselle. There's the Aquarium Adventure there. There's Around that area, there is Fish Planet in Deerfield, which is like about 20 minutes away, and that's a beautiful store as well too. There's a lot of really cool shops in Chicagoland, and we're fortunate to have them and a pretty strong local fish store scene that's very responsive to the hobby, and keeps some cool fish available and all that jazz. But yeah, Aquashella will be fun. I'm doing a couple of tanks for that one because I'm local and I can grow them out ahead of time for about a month before. So hopefully they'll look a little bit nicer. So if you come on by, take a look and keep your eyes peeled because you may see something that looks like a Planet tank, but it's really a saltwater macroalgae tank. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Well, before we wrap things up, Jonathan, they've asked in chat a couple times, is that the Owasi guy? Is that the macroalgae god? Are you the darter guy?
Identify yourself.
What do you want to be known as?
Oh man, I can't just pick one, as you can tell.
He's the guy.
I don't know.
Nice guy.
Pick one. What's your favorite?
Or
do you want to be the antique aquarium guy?
Oh,
the good guy.
I was able.
How about you just be Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm Jonathan.
I wasn't more like, what guy are you? I wanted to know which one is your favorite out of the four of the topics that we
Grant.
brought.
They all hold such a different, like, each part of my life I was into a different niche of this, right? Like, I'm going through my antique aquarium phase right now. I'm refurbishing some to set up as Planet tanks and hopefully use that for some material for videos and just showing people what you can do with them. I was really into macroalgae for the last 2 to 3 years, and I had kept macroalgae prior in college and high school when I was keeping saltwater tanks. Whenever I got into something, I don't, this sounds really pretentious, but like I never really liked going with what everyone else likes. So I never did get into like I gotta have a Zoa garden, or hey, I gotta get into acros. I always satisfied that because I was also working in the hobby at stores and at maintenance gigs. So I do that on someone else's dime and then do the hobby of weird things and experiment. And I think that's very important to do. And, anyone listening, like, do what you like. You know what I mean? Do what you like.
Flex the science brain.
Well, yeah. Like when you got heavy into the plant propagation and everything and cultivation and, that's fun. Obviously, sometimes it becomes more of a chore sometimes when it's in a business or if it's for work. Just the same as like when I'm visiting stores and things like that. Like it's sometimes nice to have just a very simple tank. Like I see some eyes moving around, but I don't know what it is, but tiger barbs. I don't know. There's something very classic and iconic about like a tank with crypts, and Anubias and just tiger barbs, or like a pair of hemichromis jewel cichlids, just, and that's kind of where I'm getting with the metal frame tanks, right? Is just doing some classic like aquarium setups with some like kind of new age equipment thrown on there and just making it simple and easy. And
I'm all for some Sagittarius, some Jungle Val, and some Neon Tetra.
Oh, but it's fun when you
throw
can
the
frame it
Ultims in there,
on
the
simple.
Angels. Those are just stunning against the rim of those tanks. There's someone that has a gigantic one with Ultim Angels in it, and they really shine against the stainless steel rim.
Yeah.
Germany has a huge collection of the antique tanks. Like if you want to see some crazy Victorian tanks, Germany's got some awesome photographs.
They have, it's weird. Europe has way more of like the 1800s tanks. Here in the US, those are a little bit more scarce, and we obviously have way more, because you gotta remember, like, the aquarium hobby used to be one of the 3 most popular hobbies in the US in like the 50s and 60s, I believe, or like the 40s, 50s, and 60s. It was like photography, aquariums, and I think like home cooking or baking or something like that, very Americana, right? But it was one of those things where aquariums were so popular back in the day, and they still are, but maybe to a lesser extent just because of the diversity of things that are out there. But I think
it's like 10% of people now.
That's still pretty high.
It's low. Well, yeah.
When you consider it, like that's a lot of people, but yeah, compared to back then,
that's goldfish and betas and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a very the people that are keeping high energy tanks is very much a 1% of that
Yes.
hobby in that niche, you know. But
Less than that, probably.
yeah, so I like a lot of things, so I don't know. You don't have do we have to put a label on it? You know,
Jonathan.
It
Yeah,
it
don't
didn't have
put
to be a
yourself in a
label. I
box.
just wanted to know which one was your favorite. The macroalgaes, freshwater aquascaping, the darters collecting.
Ah,
I don't know. I think native fish kind of hits home, but you can do native fish with aquascaping. You can do
Right.
biotope
They
tanks
all
with
come
native
together.
They all come together. You can do aquascaping with macroalgae tanks. So
inside classic tanks.
yes. Although I don't think I'm gonna try macroalgae tank in a stainless steel frame tank.
That would go well, man. You should.
Salt drip, man.
Maybe for like
Heavy.
6 months, and then you start seeing the rust.
It gets
It'd be hella rustic.
Yeah. So I don't know. My name's John.
John.
I have
I like fish.
John from Chicago.
fish tanks.
I like fish.
Oh, hey there. Yeah, you know. Everyone jokes because I'm from Chicago, but I've always lived right on the border for so long, and I lived in Wisconsin for a while, and I've just been going up to northern Wisconsin to our, my grandparents' cabin for so long that I don't know. Illinois and Wisconsin, there's a blurred line there, you know. So it's good. Both states are home to me. So it's good stuff. But yeah,
Go Packers.
you know, yeah, I'm not a football guy, but I get more people saying, because my last name is Butkus, right? And Dick Butkus is one of like
Butkus.
Yeah.
Butkus or a hurricane.
Yeah. So I get people all the time. Whenever I was living in Wisconsin or traveling in Wisconsin, it was always, "Oh, you're one of them Bear fans, huh? Does he show up to your family parties?" I was like, "Well, unfortunately, no. The fridge does not show up to my family parties. It doesn't write me for my birthday either." But
Hey, I still have college professors that believe that my uncle is Stephen Covey. So,
well, there you go. You should just start saying that he is. You know,
I go with it. I say, like, if I don't confirm or deny, I'll let them believe what they believe.
Yeah. That's kind of
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I think that's going to be all for tonight. We've got next week's episode going to be on Chance channel. If you haven't already subscribed to that, check that one out at Chance Kramer. All the even episodes of Half-Baked are on over there. Half-Scaped. Oh, Jesus. And then you can catch us on Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern for our live stream. It'll be much more prepared than last week's stream. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, everybody, for watching.